All right, guys, this is Coach Campbell. Ready for any questions you guys have for me today?
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, our first question will be from Randy Peterson of the Des Moines Register. Go ahead, Randy.
Good morning or afternoon, Matt. Go back a couple years for when you were in college, and it's finals week, and you've taken your finals, and you're waiting for your professor to post the grades on the office door or wherever they used to post it. Compare that anxiety feeling, whatever, to the feeling that you have now waiting on Friday for the COVID tests of your players and staff.
Well, you got to remember, Randy, that those tests aren't just Friday. That's Sunday night, Wednesday, and Friday. So, I think it's just a different time. And, I think that's probably a really good way it's probably a really good analogy from your end of it where, there's a test that could go positive or negative and not be anybody's fault. And the reality of it is totally can change the dynamic of your team and, in a short amount of time. And so I think, again, the ability to adapt, the ability to, be able to adapt, obviously, in this new landscape that we're in is critical to your success. And so, but it's certainly a different time, and it's certainly a unique challenge for sure.
How are you going to mitigate the plane? I mean, with the seating arrangement, I guess, the players, for example?
Well, I think that is one of the really great positives of what we have going in terms of testing. Obviously we'll wear a mask on the plane. Obviously we'll sanitize the plane before we get on it. But it's there's certainly a reduction in the amount of people that are going on the trip. So, you're able to sit guys every other seat, which is certainly a positive. And we'll wear our mask on the plane, just kind of like we've done in terms of our meeting rooms and, really all the other unique ways that we've done to try to mitigate, either the spread of this or, keeping our guys healthy. So that's really what the plane will look like. I think the biggest difference is there'll be a lot less people on the plane compared to, what we would travel with normally to an away game.
Did you have anxiety during finals week? That's my last question.
Well, I didn't have much anxiety in finals week because I got to control the outcome. So, I think from my end of it, that's the difference right now. You get to control, in that world, you control the outcome. In this one, you maybe don't have the ability to control everything. And that's probably the unique challenge in this whole thing.
Thanks, Matt. See you Saturday.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question will be from John Schaefer of WOY. Go ahead, John.
What challenges come with TCU not playing a game yet this season, not having game film, and still that question mark of who's going to be their starting quarterback?
Yeah, I think for them, and I said this maybe yesterday, John, a little bit of just, I think one advantage that a TCU team has is Gary Patterson's been there for 20 years, and there's great continuity on the defensive staff. There's great continuity on the offensive staff. And so, I don't know so much as it is schematically what are they doing, even though there'll be some unique tweaks and differences to what they've done in the past to fit their personnel. But I think the other piece of it is who is their personnel. And I do think this is a team that's got a lot coming back. So there's a lot of veteranness to this football team. But I think that's probably the biggest unknown is maybe the who, as much so or more so than the what. But, I think, again, a TCU team that's prepared to handle it because they've got a great veteran coaching staff.
The next question will be from Travis Hines of the Ames Tribune. Go ahead, Travis.
Hey, Matt, I was just curious with when you guys went back to watch the film from Louisiana, what did you diagnose as maybe an issue or two that held the offense back specifically in the second half?
Yeah, I think for us it was the ability, to really do the little things well. And I really think in its entirety from the game, the one thing that you can take as a whole program is, I think it's there's times we played with great discipline on Saturday, and there's times where we defaulted back on all phases to maybe some of those habits that don't allow us to be successful. And, I think from an offensive standpoint, you're right. That came a little bit in the second half where, the running game, there was an extra hat at times that we maybe didn't do as good of a job accounting for as we needed to. There were multiple plays to be made out there, and we really didn't make a play. And then you go back to, man, what are those things? Was it a schematic issue? Was it a challenge in terms of, technique and fundamentals that were just a hair off? And I think a little bit of all those things really, when you look at it, I think that was a big thing really in our football team in general, and certainly that showed up most efficiently offensively in the second half of the football game.
Did the bye week give you a chance to address both, I guess, ends of that spectrum, whether it was the technique or the scheme?
Well, I think the great thing about the bye week, let's be honest, I think we've practiced true football with pads, and, I think the bye week gave us the ability to just continue to practice the sport of football. And I think from our standpoint, that was really big because of getting our guys to where you want them to be in terms of playing football in the game of football. And so, I think the big thing for us is, not per se it was another week of fall camp, but it felt like you just were continuing to evaluate yourself and continuing to mold yourself as a football team moving forward. And that's just kind of the cards you're dealt in the situation that we're in. And so you got to see a lot of where you were and where you're not from the game 2 weeks ago. And then you're able to make great adjustments moving forward. And so I think all those things really occurred, especially with how early and really how little time in terms of playing the sport of football that we've been at it as a football team in 2020. So I think it was invaluable for us to be able to continue to grow.
Thanks, man.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question comes from Mark Freund of WHO. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, Matt. I know you mentioned that you weren't, after the game against Louisiana, you weren't thrilled with how Brees put the ball on the ground, but thought he had played pretty well. What did you think he needed to do in the 2 weeks that have passed since, and has he done that in terms of kind of how he prepares himself to maybe bounce back or have another good game this Saturday?
Yeah, I think Brees is a young man that has the flashes of excellence that you see and have continued to see of Brees is really done because Brees is a hard worker. Really, again, I would say kind of how I just answered John a little bit of playing the game of football, the detail, the technique, the fundamentals. I think all of us catching back up to, where we need to be to efficiently play the way we need to play to be successful. I think that was probably as much of anything after the game last week. Brees hadn't put the ball on the ground in his career. And, I think just going back, evaluating why or what that needs to look like, and then continuing to harp at those little things. And I think that's all of us. That's not just Brees. That's coaches and every player, holding themselves to that fundamental standard that it takes to be successful. So, but, Brees, from all the great things you saw, it comes because Brees really works at it. Brees is a super talented athlete, but he's a young man that has worked at his craft. And again, really excited for his future and really excited to watch him continue to grow.
Our next question will come from Chris Williams of Cyclone Fanatic. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry about that. Matt, I know you think a lot of the Duggan kid. We all kind of thought he was going to be out for the season, and then yesterday there was some news that he's eligible. How does that change the way you're thinking about Saturday? I know it's weird because you just don't have tape on them at all, but did that put a wrinkle in how you guys were preparing for this one?
Yeah, I think for us as a staff, I think the amount of respect that we have for TCU, B, the elite skill that they have on offense, and then really C, I think in the back of our minds, knowing how tough Max is, that you always felt that there was a really good opportunity that Max might still have the opportunity to play. And so, I think we never took it for granted that one way or another. And, I don't know how much that really would change them one way or another in terms of schematically what they're going to do. But, I think, again, what you saw in Max a year ago is a young man that just continued to get better and better and better as the season went on. And so I think we all know that he's going to have a really bright future in this conference and, will certainly be a great challenge for us on Saturday.
Last thing for me, it's a little off topic, but I know you respect Gary Patterson a lot. Have you seen these music videos that he's been putting out during the pandemic? I was just curious what you thought of Coach Patterson's musical abilities.
No, I think that's what makes him really cool. I've got no music ability. So I think that's probably, I'm a little bit jealous that he's got this unique ability to, not only play music, but produce it, obviously. So I didn't get to see much of it, but maybe I'll try to catch a little bit here before we head down there.
Yeah, I'd recommend it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Our next question will be from Zane Douglas of the Iowa State Daily. Go ahead, Zane.
Hi, Matt. I was just wondering how you think the offense is going to adjust after the Louisiana game, and also in conjunction with that, what kind of impact Charlie has off and on the field.
I think, again, our entire team, we got to be better. So I think that hopefully our continued growth, and especially offensively, when you look at the amount of new people playing from a year ago, I think is something that we're all excited about, the growth opportunities that are available to that side of the football. From a Charlie standpoint, he's a young man that I think we all know has got a lot of potential. And I think the biggest concern from our end has been, getting Charlie healthy. And he's a young man that battled a lot towards the end of last football season, has worked really hard through the last couple months to, continue to get himself where he needs to be to get back on the field. But, I think the thing that is unique about Charlie is he's a really intelligent football player. He's obviously a very athletic football player, and he's a young man that really does care about his teammates. So I think those are all great positives about what Charlie Kolar stands for.
One more question. You brought Kane in, and he got his first touchdown last game. What did that kind of mean for his career? And I guess what kind of impact will he have moving forward this season?
Well, I think from a Kane standpoint, there's a unique group of this senior class, and this is again, these seniors are a really, really special group. 16 of them who have been through so much here, and Kane is no different. I mean, Kane has a great start to his career here at Iowa State. In the winter, after that great start, tears his Achilles. It's a long, tough road back, and it hasn't been easy from there on out. And to watch Kane, not only go score a touchdown, but his leadership, what he's done for our football program, to be honest with you, since March has been nothing short of exceptional. And he's one of the great leaders in Iowa State football, and I really appreciate who he is. He's unselfish, wants what's best for the team, and is willing to stand up for what's right, both on and off the field. And I think that part of it for me is what I really appreciate about Kane.
All right, thanks, Coach.
Yep, thank you.
The next question will come from Ben Visser of the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Go ahead, Ben.
Hey, Coach. Back in the winter when we talked quite a bit about Josh and Daquan Bailey and how they each kind of battled injuries and they both helped each other through those injuries. How have you kind of seen their closeness and relationship manifest itself onto the field now that they're both getting playing time and being pretty productive for you?
Yeah, I think the greatest highlight for me, and there was, I think there were some moments last Saturday that brought me great joy, and the one moment was, there's a third down play early in the game, and Josh flushes the quarterback to the left, and then Jaquan runs him out of bounds, and those two making critical plays in critical moments. And I sent him a snapshot after the game of that play, and just really the pride that I take that both of them have pushed each other to get to this point. And, I think the thing for me is, could you imagine how proud, their mother is watching that game and seeing how hard both her sons have worked to get a great degree here at Iowa State, to persevere through really tough and trying times, and to now be on the field together. I don't know if there would be a prouder parent moment than what Jaquan and Josh's mom went through last weekend. So I think both these young men are exceptional young men. They've grown a great deal in our program, and just for me, really, really proud to be able to coach them and be a part of their lives. And they're two young men that I've got so much respect for, and it's been really fun to watch them grow. And, we're going to need both of them to play really well for us, not only this week, but in our future, for us to continue to have success on the defensive side of the football for sure.
You mentioned it a little bit there, but their perseverance. They both, Josh Bailey, this is his first time getting actual, legitimate playing time and critical moments, like you said. And Jaquan last year, he has a serious injury and has to miss most of the year. So what can you say about their perseverance for them to get to this point and make an impact for you?
Well, I think our toughness is defined by how you respond to adversity, right? And, I think the word that you're using, perseverance, is very definitive of really both of these two young men. Josh is a young man that you want to talk toughness. Like you said, not playing a lot of meaningful snaps until the 5th year of his senior year, and to stay the course, to keep getting better, to stay in the weight room, to keep coming to work every day, to keep showing up. That's really hard to do. We're a society of instant gratification. And here's a young man, a 5th-year senior, where there has been not a lot of gratification for the work that he's put into his craft. And yet he kept pounding away, hoping at some point that gratification would occur. And so again, you talk about this special senior class, there's a lot of those stories, and obviously Josh is one of the lead examples. Jaquan, his story's been told a bunch, obviously, and, dealing with an injury and working through that. And like I said a year ago, I think what my greatest pride was, Josh was a great contributor to Jaquan getting through tough and trying times. So I think you hit the word correct, perseverance. I feel like the word for me is toughness, just because their ability to respond to tough and trying times, they've done it. And I think they've made a lot of people really proud of who they've become through this process.
Thank you, Coach.
Yep, thank you.
Our next question comes from Scott Docterman of The Athletic. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, Matt, it takes incredible discipline and perseverance just to be a student athlete in any sport in the most normal of times, but in the middle of a pandemic, it's got to be much more difficult. However, looking at your numbers for COVID, what have you guys been able to do to keep that away from your team? The entire university, for that matter, the athletic wing of it. How have you been able to keep those numbers down, and what kinds of ways in disciplinary fashion have your players been able to kind of keep those numbers down?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott. And, I think the concern you always have with answering this question the best way possible is, you're one test away from the perception of that question shifting. And, I think the reality for us from March till now is we have had great leadership within our walls and our seniors to say, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to accomplish. And they have such respect from their teammates that they have been able to really do a great job of creating really a great bubble within our walls. And, obviously there's a lot of credit to our athletic training staff, but I think every school in the country is doing a great job not, having the spread of the disease or having the spread of this virus occur within their walls. But the challenge in college athletics is you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. We can't keep our kids in a hotel. We can't keep a bubble like the NBA. So the reality has to be in the buy-in value of the 18 to 22-year-olds on your sport to say, you know what, hey, I'm going to make great choices. I'm going to wear a mask if I have to go out in public. I may not go out to a restaurant. I may have, I may make great decisions and stay at home. Those are all tough challenges. And again, when you say there's great sacrifice to play the sport of football right now, I mean, we're dealing with 125 kids in our football program that, we're going on 4 weeks now where you haven't had a positive test. And, our kids continue to do a great job of making great sacrifices. But, that's hard because there's a lot of sacrifice you're willing to make to play a sport. And, and then you remember there's only 11 guys playing on offense, defense, and special teams on every play. So I think your overall cultural buy-in has to be really, really good if you're going to have the ability to sustain success in a season like this.
And then a follow-up, as far as a couple of players who one didn't play and one got hurt, Trevor Downing and Charlie Kolar, what's their status for this weekend?
Yeah, I would say both guys are really day-to-day. I think there's a really good expectation that they're both going to make the trip. I think Charlie has certainly made great progress over the last week and a half to 2 weeks, which is big. And, but I also wouldn't say he's at 100%. And, I think we'll evaluate, is he game ready here by the end of this week? And I think Trevor's made a lot of good progress as well. And so, we'll kind of evaluate those two guys. Rob Hudson's another guy that is certainly potential to help our football team, in a really positive way. And I think I would throw him in the same boat, day-to-day guy. So, we'll kind of evaluate all three of those guys to see where they're at by the time we get to Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Chris Vanini of The Athletic. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, man, obviously that game against Louisiana, a lot of big special teams plays, both good and bad for you guys. There have been a lot of special teams mistakes really across the country. Is that an aspect of the game you think has been impacted by kind of the situation, whether that's available guys or whether that's practice or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that, Chris, that's a really good question. I know from our end, it's a thing. It's an area where we do practice, obviously, a lot in terms of our special teams. And I think the one thing, and our errors within the game really came in our coverage units. And I think one thing that's really hard to replicate right now, as you're trying to prepare for a season different than maybe getting a spring practice or getting some of those quality scrimmages in fall camp, is those full speed live reps. And, I think you take your first game and you look at where are some of those areas that are of really challenging, what really challenged you the most? Well, tackling wasn't great early in the game. I pretty much expected that. Tackling on coverage reps and special teams, those were two major errors that really occurred within the football game that were, game changers. So I think that's catching up to football speed, to game speed. In a year like we're having and the lack of maybe preparation of true game speed, I do think that's a real challenge. And, obviously playing, a little bit earlier and having a lot shorter of a fall camp, I think that was certainly a challenge for us and something that hopefully we've gotten corrected and was certainly valued, at least to be able to play in a game and to see where we're at and where we were not.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Our next question is from Rob Gray of Cyclone Fanatic. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, Matt. I know you addressed, whether it was scheme or whether it was a technique situation with some of the shortcomings in the season opener, but how did you guys come back on Monday just as a football team? Because I know you look at how they adhere, and I know it's been strong. Did anything strike you about how they came back out of that game and with the perspective on the 9 games to come?
Yeah, I think for me, Rob, the second we walked into that locker room, And it wasn't Matt Campbell asking, does anybody have anything to say? It was the leadership of our football team immediately addressing the game. That's huge. I think that's where we've grown in 4 or 5 years. And to hear a guy like Greg Eisworth speak, to hear a guy like Jaquan Bailey speak, to hear a guy like Chase Allen speak, and put perspective and reality to what had just occurred, and then to watch our football team come back. And as much as there are unique challenges to the season and maybe what had come prior to that football game, there were still some moments within that football game that you can reflect on and say why and what has challenged us to take the next step of playing with the consistency, Rob, that we need to play with here, right? And I think the ability to stay within our discipline and not leave and lean on our default. I think default says things get really tough, things get really trying. You end up doing your own thing and you end up doing what you're not coached to do, and maybe it's that moment that costs you the game. The discipline is, man, it gets really hard, it gets really trying, and I stay within the fundamental or technique. And I think for us it's a lot more about that than it has to do with any scheme or any technique or any fundamental. I think it's the ability to play with great discipline and within our discipline to be the best we can be. And again, a lot of young guys, a lot of new guys getting opportunities to show that and being put in the fire, and a really hot fire to get thrown into right away. But I think it'll certainly benefit all of us in the long run. And so a long answer to your question, but I would say I was really proud of instantaneously how our program responded and how they needed to respond.
Gotcha. And a quick follow-up, your defense, obviously you talked about Jaquan and Josh Bailey, but the defensive line, against the really powerful, everyone thinks about the quarterback for Louisiana, but they showed how powerful the running game is again in a tough win last Saturday. How strong is that unit as a whole, and is that one of the bright spots that emerged out of that season opener?
Yeah, I think, again, Rob, there's a lot of guys that have played football, and I think if you do go back to that game, you look at it and it's like, man, the guys that have played a lot of football were ready to roll, and you got the Jaquan. I thought Jaquan played one of his best games of consistently playing the game of football that I've seen him play, which I was really proud of. I think you look at the game that we had from an interior standpoint, and I thought those guys inside, whether it was Isaiah Lee, Latrell Bankston makes a nice play, Josh Bailey does some really good things, but then you go on the other side of it, right, and you see Will McDonald has a great football game, and then I think Ennie's continuing to improve and get where he needs to be dominating week in and week out. Zach Peterson was consistent in what he needed to do. Tucker Robertson made some great plays. So I think the positive for us is there's a lot of really good players there. There's a lot of guys that have played a lot of football, and you expect that group to be a really bright spot. Very similar to what you see at the linebacking core with the Rose and Vance and Hummel. Guys that have played football. They played a lot of football, and they have a high standard for themselves. So I think, those were things, the bright spots for me were our veterans were ready to roll. Our veterans played like veterans, and I thought that was really big for us.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep, thank you.
Our final question for Coach Campbell will come from John Schaefer of WOI. Go ahead, John.
Matt, Brock is always willing to be honest with us about, the pressure he puts on himself and the ownership he takes in these games. What did you see out of Brock the last 2 games, and what type of conversations do you have not only about on the field, but the mentality side of making sure he's not pressing too much, especially when you get into those situations like you did against Louisiana?
Yeah, again, that's a great question, and I think the thing you love about Brock Purdy is how much he cares. The thing you love about Brock Purdy is how hard he works. The thing you love about Brock Purdy is how competitive he is. And I think part of all of our growth process, and I probably can relate a lot more to Brock because to me it's work, put the work in, put the time in, so you're confident in those moments and you want to be the best in those moments. And, I think for Brock, I think he carries a lot of ownership in terms of, you know, a success or failure of a play or a game on his shoulders. And, you know, I think the thing constantly that you have to remind Brock is he is one player. And that's what makes football really special is it's a team sport, the greatest team sport known to mankind. And, you know, it's got to take all 10 guys working in unison for you to be successful. And so I think you just continue to remind him that. The same message that I talked a little bit about a little bit earlier, you know, to our entirety of our team, you know, living in your discipline, not in your default. And, you know, sometimes you want to be so great, so bad that you kind of default to some mechanisms that take you out of what you want to do and how bad you want to be good. And, you know, I think that's where you got to kind of sink back into your fundamentals and sink back into your discipline. And so, you know, I think all things, not just even Brock related, really our entire football program related, that we continue to pound away at. And, you know, again, I know I've said this a million times, but, you know, there's nobody you want to be around. There's nobody you want to compete with, and there's nobody you want to lead with more than Brock. And how he prepares himself, it's a great honor to be around and watch. And again, you know, it takes a lot of ownership of success and puts a lot on his plate when it doesn't go well. And you appreciate that too.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Thank you.